I also want to say welcome you here to the house of the university president here at CGU. I guess you realize that's where you are. That this is it's great for us to be able to have this kind of event in, I think, this kind of a venue where it is more relaxed and comfortable, and also at the same time very dignified and important in terms of this institution. It also is an important place for the city of Claremont. That this is one of the earliest houses that was built in Claremont. So this is kind of the beginning of Claremont in this place. I also say that the School of Educational Studies is the beginning of CGU, that it was the first school at CGU, the first degrees were awarded in the School of Educational Studies. So it's a place of beginnings. And that's the context of saying, I think that this is kind of where we're going to hear about Andrew's beginnings, his earliest parts of his pathway. And he will talk to us about his personal journey from where he started and now where he has arrived. He is currently the Vice President for Administration of Finance at another consortium school, at Harvey Mudd College, and treasurer at Harvey Mudd College. He's a product of local education. He received his BA in accounting and his MBA from Cal Poly Pomona, just down the road. But most importantly, he received his PhD from CGU in the School of Educational Studies in 2014. Prior to his arrival at Harvey Mudd in 2013, Andrew spent 14 years in public accounting and was a partner and consultant for a national accounting firm. And prior to that, he was employed for the city of Fullerton in their finance department. So today, Andrew is combining his finance background with his higher education training and degree in CGU, and has continued to make scholarly contributions in that space, higher education and finance. And so in terms of what our graduates do in terms of contributing to scholarly work, he's a great example of that. And that we have also benefited from him directly within the school because he teaches a course for us in economics and finance of higher education. And he teaches that course not just at CGU, but also most recently at Redlands University. So he's a great example, I think, for us in terms of a successful graduate, but also someone who has a very unique background and has used his educational background in SES to take him to new places in his career, and we're happy to see him on that positive trajectory going forward. So inside and outside of the classroom, both on and off campuses, his success story, I think, really epitomizes what it is that we're about here at CGU and the identity and mission about what we're trying to do here at CGU. So I want to thank you again for being here, and I especially want to thank Andrew for sharing with us that personal trajectory and story. Thank you so much.
So good evening. I want to begin by saying I'm really honored that you've taken the time out of your very busy schedules to be with me today to hear a bit about my journey. I believe it will become really clear the role that mentorship and CGU has played in my life. So I'm going to give a little bit about my background, and then I'm going to open up for questions. So I was born in the late 60s. My family lived in East Los Angeles and then moved to Bell Gardens and later to Whittier. My father was born in Guatemala. My mother was born in Mexico. But for most of my childhood, I felt like an outcast for various reasons, but primarily because I was a severe stutterer. I don't know if many of you know that. A recurring thing that I had, beginning at age 5 till probably 15, was being in a classroom with 30 students, waiting for my name to be called to read, when I know two things were going to happen. I was going to speak, I was going to stutter, and people were going to laugh. And so needless to say, I hated school. So I was a solid CD student. But in 1980, things changed. I met my champion. If you've not heard a TED Talk entitled "Every Child Needs a Champion" by Rita Pearson, I would encourage you to do so. It is a very inspiring talk by an educator who has seen her role as being a champion to countless children and teenagers. My daughter, sitting right over there, Ohana, introduced me to this TED Talk, and she asked me, she says, "Dad, do you have a champion?" I said, without skipping a beat, I said, absolutely, Mr. Bowley, my 7th grade social studies teacher. Mr. Bowley, and given his belief in me, literally my grades went from C's and D's to A's overnight. Miguel Rubalcaba, the dining hall manager at Harvey Mudd, and I were having a conversation a few months ago, and he says, Andrew, I've heard your story about Mr. Bowley. What makes Mr. Bowley different or special? And I said, I think it's that he gave Snickers every time you answered a question correctly. And I said, well, wait a minute, there was another instructor that gave candy, and I don't know his name. So it must be something else. And then I remembered. Mr. Bowley had a board, a blackboard, and he would put the name of the top 10 students, and all of a sudden my name appears number 10, and then number 9. And because of his encouragement, it continued to rise until it was number 1. So Mr. Bowley is still alive, and I reached out to him about a year ago, and I said, oh, he's 95 years old. I said, he's not going to remember me. And so I got his phone number, his contact information, I emailed him, we set up a time to speak, and then I called him. I said, Mr. Bowley, do you remember me? He says, oh yes. You're that boy that you would go to Smart and Final, you would buy candy, you would put it in your backpack, you would sell it to the teachers and the students. I said, yes, that was me. And I said, Mr. Bowley, you do remember I stuttered, right? He says, I do now because you reminded me. But when you sent me that email, that's not the person. That's not who I thought you were. I wasn't a stutterer. That wasn't my identity to him. I was somebody who was a promising student. It was also at this time that one of my mom's favorite sayings became real to me, and my daughters can quote it. Querer es poder. The desire for something is the power and the ability to attain it. Desire, when combined with passion, can drive us to accomplish great things. My father and mother modeled to me what it was to work hard. And now that I was academically motivated, I needed to bring to bear that motivation to my studies. And my parents were also my champions. My father more quietly and my mother more vocally. So I know this is going to sound strange, but I didn't realize I was brown until I was 16 years old. Even though I attended a school, I attended Bell Gardens High School. It was a large Caucasian population, but it was also a large population of students of Hispanic descent that didn't speak Spanish. So I didn't recognize I was different. Well, that changed one day when I was teaching a friend how to drive, and we started in Bell Gardens, and we ventured into the city of Downey. Back then, it was primarily populated by Caucasians. And the guy, he's driving, he panics in the middle of the road. I mean, in the middle of the road. And I said, get back. So he got to the back seat. I moved from the passenger side to the driver's side. What I didn't know is there was a cop that was watching us. So he pulled us over, and then he says, what are you doing? And I explained, and he says, let me see your license. And I showed it to him. He says, you're lucky. I'm not giving you a ticket, but get your Hispanic ass back to Bell Gardens. Yeah. And it was at that moment I said, oh, I am different. And unfortunately, experiences like that recurred in my teens. At 17, I began the journey to conquer my stuttering. In 1984, a junior in high school, I went to the high school career center and I applied for a job and at a local grocery store. And the individual gave us the information, and of course I stuttered. And he said, can I introduce you to someone? I said, sure. So he introduced me to their speech therapist. And the speech therapist, I remember I was in the doorway like it was yesterday, and she looked at me and she said, you have to acknowledge something, Andrew. You're going to stutter for the rest of your life. I was mad. I had some choice words for her, but the PG version of it was hell no. And I decided that I had to conquer this fear. So I signed up for a speech class, not speech therapy, a speech class, giving speeches. And my first topic was Social Security. I researched it, I delivered it, memorized, I knocked it out of the park, and I realized that I didn't stutter. And I didn't stutter because it was about confidence. And if I felt that I knew more than other people in the room, I wasn't going to stutter. I've heard it said that high school should be the best of years of your life. Not so for me. I really hated it since I didn't fit in. I was definitely not comfortable in my own skin. I was not athletic like most boys around me. Additionally, the decade of stuttering had given me a reputation of being kind of an odd duck. There were other people I knew who stuttered, but they were kind of low under the radar, but Mr. Bowley didn't allow me to be low under the radar. So I'm this person out there getting good grades and stuttering. But because of Mr. Bowley's motivation, I became 6th in a class of 600 based on GPA. So I was not in the shadows. I was this odd duck that couldn't hide and was trying to fit in. In my last year of high school, my father had his first of several heart attacks, which led him to begin attending a church. He invited my sister and myself to church. There I met one of my first mentors, David Villarreal, a mentor whose personal mission was to help youth develop their faith. And after attending church for about a couple months, I had a spiritual epiphany. I realized that God existed and God loved me. So no matter how others would treat me, it didn't matter because I felt that God had my back. So after graduating college in 1989, I began my profession as a CPA. During college, I became very involved in church and enjoyed mentoring the youth of the church. One of the people I met was a woman named Perla. Some of you know her. She was the opposite of me, a little less intense than I am, a lot less intense than I am. She was very comfortable in her own skin, and I was on my journey to become comfortable. We began dating in 1992, and we're married in 96. So, I don't know if you ever heard this, but I've heard the best marriage advice. Before marriage, eyes wide open. During marriage, half shut. Basically, don't sweat the small stuff, right? So, last year, we were married 20 years. People who know her, Diane, Dean, I chose wisely, right? So, years ago, Mr. Bowley had sparked a light in me, a desire to know more. I decided the best way to continue my journey of this knowledge was to go back to school. So I told my wife I wanted to go back to school, Cal Poly, to get my MBA. She said, fine, but you better finish before we have kids. So we developed a plan. We locked our TV in the closet for 2 years, no joke. And this before internet and, streaming. And so I worked tirelessly with a 50, 60-hour work week to finish my MBA, and a week before Ohana was born, I turned in my thesis. The period between 2000 and 2003 was very busy and impactful to me. A few months after finishing my MBA, I was offered an adjunct position to teach auditing at Azusa Pacific University. In late 2000, early 2001, I was admitted as a partner to the accounting firm that I worked at, and I became the first Hispanic partner in their 30-year history. I also became heavily involved in professional organizations, did a lot of public speaking, and had my second daughter, Grace. So both of my beautiful and smart daughters are here today. I'm embarrassed. I mean, raise your hand. Grace and Ohana are there. So in early 2003, while still at the public accounting firm, I was working over an average of 60 hours a week and in a hotel room, literally a third of the year. The firm had been growing consistently for 10% a year for 4 years, and you might think that's a good thing, but you can't sustain that. So although I was working a ton, I loved my job. And I had no intention to leave. And in March 2003, I was looking through the Chronicle of Higher Education for an advertisement. I was actually looking for one of my clients for one of the colleges I audited. Her husband was relocated to the LA area, and I was looking for her. So there was a position advertisement, Harvey Mudd, and it said they wanted someone in an MBA, a CPA, and someone that had over 10 years of nonprofit experience. And I said, she doesn't have that, but I do. So I decided to apply. I actually had no intention to take the job since I thought it was a long shot that they would hire me. I knew of Harvey Mudd's reputation. I asked how likely it would be that Harvey Mudd would hire someone, that graduated from Cal Poly Pomona. I thought I didn't have the pedigree. I applied for the job. I've never felt so comfortable in my life. They say the best time to find a job is when you have one you love, right? So I got the offer. So I went home and I told my wife I got the offer. She said, what are you going to do? I'm like, well, I'm not taking this. And she says, Andrew, she says, when you're on your deathbed, what would you have wanted to accomplish in your life? I said, oh, that's easy. A deep faith, a deep relationship with you, and a deep relationship with my kids. And she said, can you accomplish that at Cape? And I said, no. And that day I called John Strauss and I accepted the offer. So I started in July 2003, sitting in my first intercollegiate treasurer meeting in the summer. I noticed I was the only Hispanic. I then realized I was the first Hispanic treasurer. I then began to feel something I have never felt before, the imposter syndrome. A phenomenon where individuals who have achieved success and have external evidence of their competence still doubt their success. Despite my successes, I questioned why I was here. Did John make a mistake? I was made to feel less by some prior Claremont College treasurers, not the current ones, they're sitting over there, or any of the current ones, by being too young, too different For those of you who know me, I talk with my hands, I'm very animated, but I pressed on. In 2005, I applied to the PhD program at the School of Education, CJU. I met with Dr. Schuster, Dr. Smith. They interviewed me and decided I was a good candidate for the program. What they didn't know is that I had no intention to finish the program. I just wanted to take the classes. I wanted to understand the nuance of faculty and student life. I had the type of job that I wanted to retire from. So I enrolled in the program because of these reasons. So in 2010, I finished all my coursework, and I was about 5 years into the program. I then wandered for 4 years, and I made little progress on my dissertation. My faculty advisor, Dr. Darrell Smith, asked me why it was taking me so long, and I said, I'm busy. And she said, cut the crap. Everybody's busy. What is the real reason? And I said, okay, where I grew up, given my background, I can't see myself as an academic. And she said, well, I will see it for you until you can. So here, ponder how profound that statement is. Here's a woman that I respected, that was highly regarded by others, and she believed that I could do it. So guess what? I could do it. Around the same time of mine, a colleague of mine, Maria Torres, director for the Chicano Latino Student Association at the Claremont Colleges, introduced me to Dr. Tony Jimenez, assistant director for CLSA. Tony cited research that found that less than 1% of Latinos that begin elementary school in this country obtain a PhD. I reflected on the staggering statistic as well as what I had learned at CGU, and I also spoke with those familiar with research, family, and friends, and I realized that there were several challenges: economic considerations, resistance from family members or accused students of not doing their part to support the family, and the imposter syndrome. Some of these challenges resonated with my own experience, and I realized that in order to be part of the solution, I had to finish, and I had to use my experience to motivate others. The comment made to me by Dr. Jimenez and belief in me by my faculty advisor was all the motivation I needed. However, as I learned from my professors, Dr. Paik, I now needed to operationalize the idea. My wife gave me permission to ignore her and the girls for 4 months. I'm sorry, Ohana and Grace. She said, I got the girls, I got the house, you knock it out. I said, okay. So I did. On 3 separate occasions, I checked myself into a hotel in San Diego, love the ocean, San Diego, for a week at a time. I bought groceries on the first day and did not emerge from the hotel until a week later when I had read approximately 1,000 pages and had written 50 pages every time. And I did this 3 times. I met Dr. Jimenez in March of 2014. 30 days later, I successfully defended my proposal. And 3 months later, in August 2014, 4 months after I met Tony, I successfully defended my dissertation. To my committee, Dr. Darrell Smith, Dr. Linda Perkins, and Dr. Scott Thomas. I had classes with Linda and with Darrell, but I had never taken a course with Dr. Thomas. I chose him because his field is economics and it was relevant to my field of research. To be honest, I was a bit intimidated by him. This is his field. And Linda probably remembers that at the proposal defense, he kind of questioned why I was using a qualitative approach as opposed to a quantitative approach. So, and he also had his doubts that I would finish finish in 3 months. He said, I've heard that before. So, on the day of my defense, I knew my topic. I was confident. I knew I would successfully defend it. But I didn't think it would contribute to the literature. So some of you know, what is a good dissertation? A done dissertation. So I knew I could do a done dissertation. I didn't know if I could do a really good one. And so, but Dr. Thomas was the first member to walk into the room, and he looked at me and he says, before anyone walks in, I just want to tell you, this is one of the best dissertations I've ever read in my life, and it's going to contribute significantly to the literature. I was stunned. I need to pause here. I'm sure you can agree that there are a few moments in your life that are profound and transformational. For me, these moments are the following: meeting my champion, Mr. Bowley, beginning the journey to conquering my stubborn, discovering faith, marrying my life partner, Perla, the birth of my 3 children, Ohana, Grace, and Andrea, who's not here. Early in my career at HMC, discovering that I suffer from the imposter syndrome and defending my dissertation. Every one of these milestones was significant, but the last one, defending my dissertation, finishing my PhD, was achieving critical mass. A year before defending my dissertation, if you had asked me what the scariest thing for me would have been defending a dissertation. I jumped out of a plane from 10,000 feet. I've skydived, and I still thought defending a dissertation would be very difficult. But I shattered that obstacle. And something happened at that moment. I realized, if I set my mind to anything, I can do it. And at that moment, I began a journey to make myself uncomfortable. When I defended my dissertation, Dr. Thomas said, I look forward to seeing the advancement of your scholarship. I said, the advancement of my scholarship? I'm done. What are you talking about? and he says, and I'll help you. I said, well, despite my first reaction, I said, you know what? I can do this. So I decided that I partnered with a colleague at Harvey Mudd, and I wrote an article on financial crisis management based on my research. And we wrote it and submitted it to the Journal of Education Finance in 2015. In early 2016, we heard that the journal was interested in the article, but they wanted some changes. Around the same time, Dr. Thomas made good on his comment about helping me. And in March 2016, he sent me an email that said that 20 years ago, when he was at the beginning of his career, he was invited to a roundtable hosted by Michael Olivas from the University of Houston. And typically they invite faculty who are junior to submit research to him and to other coaches a month or so before the roundtable. The coaches review the material in advance and then provide detailed feedback to the faculty. Although the primary attendees are typically faculty, on occasion they make exceptions for non-typical candidates like myself. So Dr. Thomas emails Michael Olivas and says, would you consider Andrew? And he said yes. Dr. Thomas sends me an email. My first reaction is, yeah, right. I want to defend my dissertation all over again with a bunch of smart people in the room? No. And I was writing the email, and I'm like, you're on a journey to make yourself uncomfortable. And I said, okay. So I submitted my application. I was accepted. I had my doubts that after that, while attending the roundtable, that I might be considered an outsider. You know, you've heard about administration, the evil, the dark side. And I thought I wasn't going to be embraced by the faculty and the other students. To my surprise, I was welcomed with open arms. The feedback provided by the roundtable was invaluable. In fact, on the 5-hour trip back from Texas to California, I incorporated their feedback into the article. I submitted the next day, and within months I found that it was accepted, and last month it was published. Hey. Grace was there when I went to the post office and looked at it and saw my name. It was something else. So Dr. Thomas was so interested that on the day I'm traveling, while I'm on the plane, he says, so what happened? Tell me about your experience. So I wrote him a 4-page email. Some of my colleagues know I write long emails at late at night. And so I wrote him this long email reflecting on my experiences. I then met with him over lunch to discuss. I remember thinking, Dr. Thomas, I've never had a class with him. He owes me nothing. And yet he decided to invest in me. I realized that Dr. Thomas, like many other professors at CGU, cared about my professional development. One of the things that Dr. Thomas did during my defense startled me. After successfully defending my dissertation, Dr. Thomas said, I'm going to do something that I've never done before. I'm going to offer you a job as an adjunct faculty to teach research, higher education, finance, and economics. And he asked what I thought. I'm exhausted. So I'm like, I'm going, no. And then Dr. Perkins said in a very motherly voice, shaking her finger, at least that's what I perceived she was doing, shaking her finger and says, Andrew, you don't say no to these opportunities. What do you say? And I said, yes, ma'am. I want to teach the course. Fast forward a couple years, after teaching the course for 2 years at CGU, I was recently approached by the University of Redlands, who learned that I teach an innovative course in higher education finances. They asked me to teach a course in higher education, finance, and budget with a social justice perspective. My initial thought was, I'm too busy. But then I realized, I love teaching. I spoke to my wife, we came up with a priority plan, so I wouldn't ignore the kids, and that would allow me to teach the course, and I began teaching it last month. None of this would have been possible without the support of the faculty at CGU. Finishing my PhD provided me more time than I had for a long time. When you're busy, you're in a PhD, you have this big cloud over your head. So, but after learning about the statistic that less than 1% of Latinos that begin elementary school in this country obtain a PhD, I have sought opportunities to encourage others to obtain education, especially graduate education. I joined the mentoring program at Harvey Mudd. I became involved in the Business Advisory Council at Bright Prospects, a nonprofit whose mission is to help underrepresented minorities to and through college, and also help them begin their careers. I'm look for opportunities to give back and mentor to students, especially underrepresented minorities. sometimes I hesitate to share my story because about finishing my dissertation in 4 months, because I fear that people might think I was bragging. And then I reflected and I said, I'm not bragging about myself. I'm bragging about the village that allowed me to do this. And then I pause and say, but maybe you should not share this because not everybody has a village. However, at this point, I'm reminded of a phrase in the Bible that I quote often, and I know I'm taking it out of context, but it's worked. You have not because you ask not. So after a networking event at Bright Prospect, 2 students came up to me and asked me if I would mentor them. Of course, I can't say no. While I was teaching my summer higher education course at CGU, I was approached by one of my students, Melinda Harriman, which many of you may know. She worked for the Drucker School, and now she works for Westmont College. And she asked me to serve on her dissertation committee, and I agreed. She successfully defended her proposal last summer, and then she's about a month away or so from defending her dissertation. So while providing my background, I neglected to say that why I chose Cal Poly Pomona for my undergraduate. I applied to 3 colleges, Biola, UCLA, and Cal Poly. Though I was accepted to all 3, I declined UCLA because I thought that the $6,000 tuition room and board was too much. Yeah, add a 0 to that, right? Despite being the top 1% of my class, I'm embarrassed to say that at age 17, I did not know that Harvard or Yale or Stanford existed. Nobody told me. Now, don't get me wrong. I think Cal Poly provided me with a wonderful education. They taught me how to be a CPA, and that degree and knowledge has served me well. However, it was not a liberal arts education as I would come to understand at CGU. Shortly into my program at CGU, I learned about the Truman Commission report from Dr. Perkins. In 1946, President Truman appointed the Presidential Commission on Higher Education with the task of defining responsibilities of colleges and universities in American democracy and re-examining objectives of higher education in the United States in light of the social role it has to play. The report issued in 1947 played an important role in the democratization of higher education. The report stated, too often, he or she is educated in that he or she has acquired competence in some particular occupation, yet falls short of the human wholeness and civic consciousness which the cooperative activities of citizenship require. My wife went to Occidental College, and during her college career, we would compare our educational experiences, and I realized they were radically different. I began to realize that maybe I missed out on a liberal arts education. While I was taking courses with Dr. Aguayas, Dr. Schuster, Dr. Perkins, Dr. Smith, Dr. Paik, and others, I knew that the education at CGU was different than what I had at Cal Poly. However, it wasn't until I interacted with my faculty committee for my proposal and dissertation that I realized just how special CGU was. Dr. Smith retired in 2012. She was no longer paid by CGU. She did not abandon me. She told me she would see me through the completion. She hung in there for 2 years, gently, and sometimes not so gently, encouraging me, threatening that she was going to leave the country in the summer of 2014, and I had to finish. So I did finish in August of 2014, and she did leave the country, but she didn't tell me it was vacation. It was just a few months. I don't know if I would have finished it, but I don't know. So, as I mentioned before, number 2, I never took a course with Dr. Thomas, and yet this man decided to help me advance my scholarship. Even when I did not know I wanted to do this, little did I know how much Dr. Thomas's investment in me would influence my life. Dr. Perkins' firm and motherly advice to not say no to this teaching opportunity that was offered to me was transformational. I know people overuse this word transformational, but Dr. Thomas' offer and your encouragement, Dr. Perkins, your gentle encouragement to teach the higher ed economics and finance course significantly has impacted me. I have not realized until recently how much joy and fulfillment teaching adds to my life. And that joy, as I now enjoy, was birthed at CGU. I will end with what I think is the most significant takeaway. A couple of weeks ago, I was having a conversation with Miguel Rubalcaba, the dining hall manager. Over the years, Miguel and I have developed a friendship, and I have encouraged him to further his academic journey and to stretch himself in several areas. With my encouragement and support, Miguel began the process of obtaining a college degree in Roland Chaffee College, and has been taking various courses in writing, in math, in philosophy. Now Miguel is in competition with his 15-year-old son on who will finish their undergraduate degree first. Miguel recently shared with me that he had a conversation with his 90-year-old grandma, Genevieve. He shared with her about his educational journey and the impact that he thought I had in his life. And his abuelita said, "Se me hace que tu patrón es una esponja, pero no por la razón que tú piensas. It appears to me that your boss is a sponge, but maybe not for the reason that you think." And he said, "Explain, Grandma." She says, "What does the sponge do?" He says, "It soaks up water." He says, "What else does the sponge do?" "It releases water." She says, "There are many people in this world that soak up knowledge, but not everybody will release it. And your boss is doing that." I think his grandmother was right on target. So I leave you with this last thought. Be a sponge, soaking up in knowledge and wisdom from your mentors. But don't forget the other function of a sponge. Release knowledge by mentoring others.